Hello and welcome to NewsClick. I'm Paranjoy Guha Thakurta. What we're going to discuss today is the pernicious impact that social media has had in the recent past. Now, not everything about the social media is bad, far from it, but the fact is, over the last 12 months or thereabouts, at least 30 people, some would say more than 30 people, have died, have been killed. They've been killed by lynch mobs. They've been killed because there have been rumors that children are being kidnapped, that they're sexual predators, that people are killing cows. So we see in India today the ugly side of the social media, the ugly side of WhatsApp, of Facebook and Twitter. To discuss this issue, I'm very happy to welcome Mishi Chaudhary. She's a lawyer based in New York and in New Delhi, currently the legal director of the Software Freedom Law Center in New York and a digital rights activist. Thank you so much, Mishi, for coming here with us. Here is Probir Purakash. He's also the president of the Free Software Movement of India, besides being editor at NewsClick. Thank you, Probir. Mishi, on the 5th of July, the Union Minister for Information Technology, Ravi Shankar Prasad, he says that we don't want to read into everybody's messages, but if in certain parts of the country, hundreds of thousands of these messages are being transmitted, then something is wrong. And he writes to and he tells WhatsApp that this is not rocket science. You can identify this. You can identify by using technology, by applying technology, who are these people who are circulating these, mass circulating these messages. Sure enough, WhatsApp replies very, very promptly to the minister and said, yes, we'll use machine learning, we'll identify what is happening. And this is very, very important. I mean, remember that India has over 200 million users of WhatsApp. And in fact, it's the biggest market for WhatsApp. Your reactions, your comments.
So I think in addition to that, Facebook, the parent company of WhatsApp, has also announced this crowdsourcing campaign, $50,000 for anyone who comes up and helps them with the solution to find this. That's great. You throw money at a problem and you try to say machine learning will solve everything, like Mr. Zuckerberg in his television appearances in the hearings in the US Congress tried to say. For technology, everything can be solved by more technology, which is usually the response of tech companies. In the current WhatsApp case, so one of the very simple low-hanging fruit is that in messaging apps, you can create a group and you can add as many members to those groups as you like without asking for their permission. A strategy, or at least a tactic used in a very widespread fashion by a lot of trolls. So in India, for example, a lot of prominent journalists are added to these groups without their permissions. Then pictures of their closed ones, like their wives or their daughters, are put up, they are doxxed, and then profanities and threats of rape and things, obnoxious things they would say.
In fact, recently a person has been arrested who claimed he was a part of the Bharatiya Janata Party. The BJP obviously promptly disowned him, but he's actually been arrested. I mean, this is the first case of its kind in India, but I'm sure there are dozens of cases that nobody's punished, yes.
Right, and so they add them to these groups and there is no way to exit. Each time they exit, it becomes a whack-a-mole game. So a simple thing which a lot of civil society organizations ask WhatsApp, this is not a feature, this is a bug. Why don't you fix it? It's very simple. If I want to be added to a group, I should be asked my permission to be added to the group. No response whatsoever. Telegram and Signal have responded. Now, why I'm telling you this is because this leads and tells us what is behind all of this.
Okay, I'm stopping you here. I'm going to ask Probir to react to what he said. And maybe you can add something, because Ravi Shankar Prasad says, we welcome Facebook, we welcome Twitter, we welcome WhatsApp. You must also make your work, or make your platforms commercially successful, exact words he used. But, and I quote the minister, you must be accountable, responsible, vigilant. And WhatsApp says, we care deeply about people's safety. And said, yes, yes, we are working with Indian researchers, we'll run public safety campaigns, we'll launch a new label in India to help identify messages that are forwarded against messages written by somebody known. Do you think any of this will have any effect, or these are just noises being made to placate the government?
Let's put it this way. The first is Mr. Ravi Shankar Prasad making these noises to placate the people? Well, the problems are elsewhere. The issue is not that we are having lynchings because there's a problem with WhatsApp. Of course, what to do with social media, I'll come to that later. But the fundamental reason why you have lynchings is because the law and order machinery has been complicit in these lynchings. They have not taken action for the last 4 years. Cow-related lynchings have been going on. Victims have been, cases have been filed against victims or victims' families. Even Akhlaq, even today, his family was killed in Dadri, as you know. His family is suffering the consequences of fraud, false cases. So, what the basic issue is that you create a climate of this kind, but the law and order machinery does not act. Let's understand one thing. Evidence is forthcoming because videos are available, messages are available. So, investigation is actually easier if you have electronic trail, which this does leave you. So, the question is, yes, preventing may be more of a problem, we'll come to that, but investigation certainly is much easier with all of this, and the fact that nothing is happening on the ground on investigations and punishment is really the crux of the problem.
So Prabir, what you're saying here is that, yes, don't kill the messenger. So the problem is the people who, are spreading this poison or these hate messages through society, and the authorities concerned, the law enforcing authorities, the governments, if they're at best turning a blind eye, or they are downright complicit in this kind of activity.
Let's put this. As we know, the troll brigade has been most active with the BJP. It has the most organized WhatsApp groups in the country. In each election, we have seen thousands of WhatsApp groups, and we've also seen this vicious campaign trolling, right-wing propaganda, fraud or fake news, fraud news, whatever you want to call it.
Propaganda, hatred.
This is what has been promoted by the RSS and the BJP. Now that it is spreading from their targets into much more general population in terms of the child lifting cases, now they're suddenly talking about that WhatsApp has certain responsibilities.
And when their own external affairs minister gets
getting trolled. Now, as Bishi said, and this is a very important point, a simple feature just takes 2 minutes to really implement. I'm sorry, technologically this is about the easiest thing you can do, that don't put me into a group without my consent. This should be a fundamental law that this cannot be done, and informed consent for participation should be at least a basic feature of any software that you put into the space.
But then the businesses who want to use WhatsApp platforms to target the various users, they will not be able to talk. And this is related to, again, an advertising revenue, because of which the WhatsApp founders, both Brian Acton and Jan Koum, left Facebook and exited from the board of the parent company Facebook, because there's a difference in how to monetize data. Now, if Facebook actually fixed this little feature, then the future part, the future
then the
plan,
commercial potential would get, what should I say,
nipped in the bud. That's not going to even happen.
Okay.
So, Parajan, this is, I think, the most important point, that unfortunately, the business model of Google, Facebook, all these big digital monopolies is fixed to what would be called virality. And therefore, if they want to monetize, which is what they really want, that's a business model. If they want to monetize, they want the ability to spread like a virus, therefore the virality. And this is why this is called surveillance capitalism.
All right.
Because this is the part of what this problem is.
Or capturing the behavior. These are behavior capturing platforms.
Okay.
You behave and I capture that behavior, and then I make a trail out of it, and then I'm able to sell psychographic profiles of people. And that's why the more you interact with the platform, the better it is for the companies who are running. If you stop interacting with the platform, which Prabeel calls virality of this platform, then there's not enough behavior for me to capture, to build profiles and be able to sell it, whether it is for ad revenue
or to a political party or for commercial gain.
Yeah.
Now, Mishi, the point that Prabir made, what you do when the purveyors of fake news, the trolls, the guys who are spreading this hatred and poison, what do you do when you find that the very people at the top, in this case of India, the Prime Minister of India, they are following these guys. And they're not unfollowing, quote unquote, these same guys, even after there is a sufficient amount of evidence that these people are spreading false information, disinformation, fake news, hate speech. What do you do when a section or maybe a large section of the ruling dispensation is not just turning a blind eye, but appears to be complicit?
Well, this also tells us that India is actually a lot of times a microcosm of how all these platforms are being used in the rest of the world. Things have happened in India much faster and much earlier than the rest of the world. The 2014 elections taught a lot about use and misuse of these platforms, which at that time, when people like us would talk, nobody would pay attention, which played out in the 2016 US elections. That when the people themselves who are supposedly to be taking care of it or watching or keeping a check on all of this are also complicit. There's a difference between, of course, political parties and the governments. And from what we hear, there's not just one political party, but everybody is now trying to monetize these platforms for their own election gains.
The whole expose about Cambridge Analytica, the deposition by Mark Zuckerberg, where he was asked, would you like to tell us which hotel you stayed in, how much you paid for that hotel? Would you like to tell us who are the people you sent messages to over the last couple of weeks? And then sure enough, he kept quiet, but the whole idea was, it was clearly told to him that, look, what you don't want to disclose to us, you are mining that data from large numbers.
My favorite thing to say is when Mark Zuckerberg bought his new house before the 2 daughters were born and his wife, because he wanted to have a family, he spent $30 million buying every house next to his house because they wanted more privacy.
Privacy is very good for yourself, very bad when it comes to general public.
Double standards.
Because I wouldn't even bother about talking double standards. I'm talking about essentially private greed. That is what militates against privacy. Because if you want to get money out of other people's data, then obviously you are against privacy in terms of what Facebook shall see of you. You see, it's also very interesting. A lot of this platform, Facebook to Google, are very strongly against so-called government intrusion. Of course, they have their links with the NSA and so on, that we know by now. But they will always fight for that this should be kept out of government regulations.
Free expression.
But it should be available to us. And this is because the business model is entirely built on private surveillance or surveillance by private big capital.
I think as long as the ad revenue is tied up with the data and collecting and monetizing data, then anything what we are going to talk about is just going to be some kind of a lip service. Because if your business model is about, I collect data and then I build profiles and then I'm able to sell them, then anything else is just going to be seen as some noises which are made.
You know, these are today among the biggest corporations on the planet. The number of users of Facebook in India, according to certain estimates, have gone up from 136 million in 2015 to over 220 million as we speak. That is, quote unquote, the potential audience of Facebook in India is bigger than that of the United States. And this number is slated or estimated or projected to grow to touch almost 300 million by 2022. So when you look at India, the government of India and Facebook, what does this tell you? What does the ordinary citizen there's an entire generation of people who, for them, there's no newspaper, there's no radio, there's no television, it's Facebook, it's WhatsApp.
Yes. And so China is off limits to Facebook. So obviously all energies are going to be concentrated on India. That's why the entire Free Basics rigmarole, where they tried to tell how much charity they were doing for the poor Indians, and the elitists were actually deprived.
And huge advertisements to tell them how they were
what
so
the poor
charitable.
Ganesh would do with the Reliance and Facebook. So yes, the market is important. That's why so much of the concentration is being is placed on India. When you ask about how do we see government and Facebook in that regard, so when the Cambridge Analytica thing happened, so there are 87 million people's data which was leaked by Facebook. 5.5 lakhs, I will use the different system, of Indian users' data was also leaked in that. And what happens in that one was that each time somebody's data was leaked, their friend circle's data was also leaked. That's why even if you have access to smaller number, but in large terms, you are also getting access to their friends and their likes. What happens? In March of this year, we hear that MeitY in its anger has sent a notice. We will send a notice to Facebook. You should come and respond. Facebook says we are very sorry.
And MeitY,
everything
for
we'll take care of it.
For the benefit of our viewers, MeitY
is
the
Ministry of
Electronics and Information Technology. Earlier it was a department, so we used to call it DAITY.
Yes.
And now it's MeitY.
DAITY to mighty.
Okay, good one.
So they send a very stern notice, give us a response, we will do something. Facebook says, we are very sorry. We are looking into it. Privacy is very important. Data security is very important. Public safety, your data is most important. We're going to keep it secure. And Mr. Zuckerberg says that in the US Congress hearings, that not only are the midterm US elections of this year important, but there are going to be large, very important elections in India next year and in Brazil, and we are going to do everything to make sure those elections go smoothly. Now that
what do you mean smoothly?
And there are things like exactly. So when 2014 elections happened, I was intrigued that Facebook was going around. First, they wanted the Obama-like I voted button, but that didn't work in India because Indians, we get ink.
Yeah, that's
here.
right. You
so
get
people started taking selfies. But they wanted to say 164 Lok Sabha seats will be impacted by use of social media. Now, that's a large number. It's not a small number.
Out of 543.
Just let's look at it. What does it really have? What's really happening? Cambridge Analytica showed us that elections can be modified, as it were.
Or influenced.
Well, whatever word you want.
Manipulated.
Manipulated, modified, whatever. Can be done through social media. Specifically, Google and Facebook are the most powerful ones. Google through its search engine, and Facebook because of its, obviously because people are immersed in Facebook. Their lives are now on Facebook. So the base issue was that Cambridge Analytica was getting some data, only a partial set of this data, and using it for targeted election campaigning and switching, shall we say, a small number of voters, percentage is 2 to 4% from one side to the other. This is called targeted campaign, which is micro-targeting, which is also what's done in terms of advertisement. This is the edge Google and Facebook have over, say, newspapers or television. Now, what is the charge? That Cambridge Analytica did it. But what about Facebook? What about Google? So the effect of what we are really talking about is people are saying, you great Facebook, if you do it, it's still okay. After a big God, the God of Facebook has done it, it's okay. But Cambridge Analytica should not do it. So you have shared your data with Cambridge Analytica. That is the original sin. Well, in my view, and I'm sure in Mishi's, the original sin is the model itself, which is Facebook. And Facebook and Google or any of these digital monopolies being able to influence the thing. The last point I would like to make, you see, which is what the government says. For instance, as you know, the IT minister, Ravi Shankar Prasad, made all this noise. Mr. Zuckerberg, this is the IT minister speaking. Well, Mr. Zuckerberg didn't really respond, didn't come, and he didn't really heed the IT minister, but he kept quiet after that. The IT minister. Let's understand one thing that's happening, that when a new media comes, and for a lot of people in India, the electronic media is new. They're reaching it only through their, cell phones. So there is this belief that if news comes in my platform like this.
It has to be
It has to be
reliable.
true. And if you remember, Paranjay, maybe you were young enough to remember this. When we were young, we were told, if it was printed, it must be true. In Bengali, there is also
Times of India that time.
There was a word, there was a sentence which is chapar okkhore lekha. So it is
Absolutely.
actually as if it's written in stone. Of course, Ananda Bazar Putrika did that for the Bengalis. We realized the chapar okkhor could be wrong.
Prabir, Mishi, I'm going to come back to you. You're going to have the last word. But Prabir, you know, Facebook's global manager, politics and government outreach, Ms. Katie Harbath, she recently had a meeting with the Chief Election Commissioner, Mr. O.P. Rawat, and she said that Facebook would track these false campaigns. There would be some sort of a automatic fact-checking mechanisms, this self-verification. How seriously do you take her reported sort of assurances, especially since the next general elections in India are scheduled for April, May of 2019? And where do you see what's going to happen in the next 8 months or thereabouts?
You know, I have worked for a large part of my life on what are called heuristics, what are called, you know, statistical techniques for basically my professional work. Okay, let me tell you something. All these techniques cannot distinguish between what is fake and what is not. It's a fundamental issue that this is something which human beings cannot do it. Computers learning from us is not going to be able to do it. So I think this is basically just soothing noises to protect their business empires. And we are willing to be convinced because we have vested interest in willing to be convinced. Today, to shut down Facebook as it stands is going to be difficult. The fundamental issue the world has to address: how do we control digital monopolies of this scale, A. B, that if they are today playing the role of public institutions, which they are globally, what is the regulatory control the world has over them? Because fundamentally, adding a feature to Facebook's WhatsApp
It's band-aid at best.
should be very, it is something which should be very simple to do. But what is the law we have in our hands to do that? That's the question. And unfortunately, national governments, including the government of India, is not willing to exercise the law, the power of the law it has over these companies, because they think they don't want to annoy this big digital monopoly.
I would say a little bit differently. I also think that there is this view of complete control. One of the things which is about the data localization, they would like all data to be stored here. Government of India can access, if required,
What
for
China
any
has
legal
done.
purpose. No, what China has done, but they otherwise also, Government of India can access and subpoena or ask Facebook, we want data for such and such criminal investigation. Sorry, they can summon and ask that this is the information we would like actually, and please provide it. They have the legal power to do it. But they would like now to say, no, bring all your servers, all Indians' data has to be stored here. I think that's mostly because there is some extrajudicial arm twisting which the governments really want to do with the companies and to collect that data. That means that the companies always can play all sides and say, look, if we do that, then we are also the people who are going to be getting on the slippery slope and enabling political censorship. Now, and that's why they play the masses to say, look, anytime anyone tries to control us, they're trying to restrict your free speech and expression. And on the issue of on how what do we do with the companies? I will remind, we are only in 2018. 2007 is when iPhone was released, and all these apps afterwards on mobile have actually blown up. It's only now people have just began to wrap their heads around that what a Frankenstein's monster this actually is.
You know, there is the law, you're a lawyer. There is the issue of ethics. There's what's happening in the globe and this cartel of big players who want to control what you read, what you watch, what you hear, and in the process making all the big bucks. Where do we move from here?
Bucks.
In the short run, what?
A lot, boku bucks as they would say.
Okay, so what can be or should be done in the short term, say till the next general elections, and the bigger, larger problem? Prabir.
Well, the short term is existing laws. There is enough teeth in existing laws to control fake news, provided you have the will to implement them. And I don't think the issue is about law in this case. If it is a lynching, there is both law outside the electronic realm, in the physical realm, as well as the
So
electronic
the
realm.
Indian Penal Code, the Criminal Procedure Code, the
As
IT
well as the
rules,
IT Act.
IT Act.
IT Act and the IT rules are adequate for this if you have the will to do so. As you said earlier, there is enough digital trace you're leaving for what you're doing. So in fact, it becomes easier to prosecute, even if it is more difficult to prevent, if you will. So that is one part of it. I think that we have reached a level where we need regulation of global regulation, national regulation of these monopolies, and fundamentally to me, if this public infrastructure, which I believe it is, then it should actually be in public hands. Okay. So how do you implement this? How do you break up these monopolies? If they did it for AT&T,
that's a bigger
much
issue.
bigger issue. That's not a 2019 issue. 2019 issue is telling the government you have the powers, don't fool us in telling us that you don't have the powers, you have enough powers, exercise them for Christ's
All
sake,
right.
you know, and that's what you're not doing.
Okay, the last word from you.
I agree that the larger things, whether they are the competition issues or how do we actually view these companies, that's not going to be solved by 2019 April or whatever. I do think that they can create a lot of educational awareness about the fact that everything which comes on WhatsApp is not gospel and you don't have to believe on all of that. There isn't any of that awareness campaign going on. The second thing is that more information from independent actors, that there is no political party which is not using these platforms to actually impact not only your conscious mind but your unconscious mind also. If you see from the UP elections, what we learned was that a lot of voters told us that, you know what, sometimes I don't believe what's come up, but when it's spammed to me 50 times, I think maybe there is a grain of truth in all of this.
It's propaganda. You repeat that lie 100 times and then you start
and
believing.
then you're like, So it's traditional techniques, only only the delivery medium has changed. And that should not tell us that everything which we have learned over centuries somehow is now invalid because we've introduced internet in there or phone in there. Those principles still apply. And I do believe that this large Twitter sets the narrative now for a lot of things which we discuss, also on electronic media or otherwise. That's why it's incumbent upon the users to demand that the companies do something, the government stops beating around the bush and makes a lot of noise, and just say, okay, these are the big issues we have to address and we are otherwise helpless around it.
Okay.
And not believe the companies that artificial intelligence, machine learning, and throw a few other buzzwords and they will solve everything.
All right. Thank you so much, Mishi, for coming here, giving us your time, giving us your views. Probir, thank you very much for throwing light on what I believe is a very, very important issue, and an issue that concerns the youth of this country, concerns all of us. And thank you very much for being with us on this program.